The future of the V4, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another online discussion hosted by the Warsaw Institute, during which we'll speak about the Visegrad Group, and the upcoming future for the project. I'm honored to introduce my today's guests. With me today, Peter Sitash, research fellow from the Danube Institute. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And Michał Rosont-Kovac, International Director from Nezopont Intesnet. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for joining me, gentlemen, today. In the meantime, I will just underline that we are organizing the event thanks to financial support of National Institute of Freedom, Center for the Development of Civil Society. Gentlemen, European elections are coming. Visegrad Group countries are in the EU. My question to you is whether the V4 can still play an important role in the EU. And the follow-up question to you, what would be better for the group? Shall we pursue towards more cohesive, common approach when it comes to decision on EU forum? Or shall we look individually at our countries? And shall we take the common approach towards revision of the EU treaties? We'll start with Peter Sitash.
Well, thank you very much, and let me greet our viewers again. Well, these are really hard questions, and it would be really difficult to answer to it just with one or two sentences. You started that, are we going to play a role, an important role in Brussels in the following years, or we won't? Well, it's up to us, in my opinion. So the V4 has been on since 1993. At that time, 1991, even at that time, it was a V3, and we were always able to find those grounds on which we can cooperate. There were pros, there were cons, there were hard times during these 3 decades, but we always found those grounds which were beneficial for all of us. And I think this should be followed in the future. On the other hand, you also asked me about the decision making, how the decisions are going to be made in the European Union in the future. So in my opinion, the rule of law should be upkept in this field because we have treaties. The last one is a Lisbon Treaty, which was accepted in every European country. In some of them, there were even a referendum about this issue. So now we can say that those grounds are given. On the other hand, to change the decision making, I don't see any point from the V4's perspective, but not just from the V4's perspective, but from any small nation's perspective, in order to give up the unanimous decision making. Because if we start on that road, that will mean that the decisions about the people living in Bratislava, in Prague, in Warsaw, in Budapest won't be made there, but they will be made mainly in Brussels or in Prague and Berlin. And I don't see any reason why we should go on with that. I don't see anything what we can get in exchange. In many times, and let me just shortly, in many times, this anonymous voting is considered as a right to veto. But in real terms, we are not talking about veto. We are talking about, because when we are talking about veto, it means that the decision has already been made. And after that, some other forum says that no, these decisions won't be applied. Otherwise, in this case, the case is different. There is no decision made until everybody agrees with it. And I don't think that this should be changed. I don't see any point why we should run and make decisions faster. The European Union was not based on rapidity. The European Union was based on win-win situations, and I think, and I do believe also, that this should be followed.
Thank you very much. I will now give the floor to Mr. Kovac with the same question of the V4 important role in the future of the EU, and either cohesive or individual approach towards decision.
Thank you again for the invitation, and let me also greet our viewers. And I'm really glad that we have this conversation with you, Maciej, and with Peter, an old friend. I don't think it will be really a debate. It's more like a conversation, because I couldn't agree more with Peter. But I'd also like to state that it's important to know that the V4 is still there, because after the changes in the Polish government, there were some voices even in the beginning of February that, now maybe the summit won't be held. Then there were some, let's say, hopes from the globalist media from Poland that maybe it's just held in order to the Prime Minister Donald Tusk says that it has no longer any sense to keep it up, and so on and so on. But what we see, that it still is active. The summit was held, and the force of the V4 cooperation was always, as also Mr. Sitas Peter stated, that we cooperate where there are common interests, and we don't cooperate where the views are different. But even when, and on top of that, it's not only the joint cooperation, but in itself, that the fact that there is a platform to communicate is already a very important asset of the Visegrad cooperation. But it's important, again, to underline that it's still there, and it's as a communicative platform, surely it will flourish. And what we see, that there are still so many common interests that it can serve as a joint interest-based active forum. Take the example of the Ukraine Grey, and also what Peter said. We have joint interest in how the voice of Central European states can be saved on the European level. It was beautifully stated that it's really the essence of the unanimous decision maker is to find the common grounds, and it's not about that someone would like to torpedo a decision already made. And it's also important to recall that Hungary has always been open to negotiate the treaties, but the treaties could be changed on the grounds of the current treaties. So even though, for example, the Hungarian government is depicted in the leftist media often as an anti-European force, it's far from the reality. Actually, it's not. Hungary considers itself now to be the defensor not only the European values, but we arrived to a certain situation where the treaties themselves are defended by governments like the Hungarian. Hungary already proposed a package of reforms that could be argued and discussed on. For example, that the integration should take place where it really brings about advantages on a European level and increases the competitivity. So it mainly should focus on areas where it brings benefits, for example, in economy, but integration itself is not a value. Integration should serve as a tool to provide well-being and security for the member states of the European Union. So those values for which originally the predecessor institutions of the EU were founded for. But and obviously we know that the position of Hungary is keep this stance of unanimous decision making of the EU. But if I may recall a speech of Prime Minister Viktor Orban, surely not quoted again in the leftist media, from Concert Note, not from the 20th of March, when the Hunyadi Prize was granted to Mr. Richard Legutko. Prime Minister Viktor Orban said that this dichotomy, this dialogue between the voices that would want to go towards an imperium like Europe and who wants to keep the strength of the member states, this dialogue in itself is not bad for the European Union. So it's a natural dialogue, and till this dialogue is conducted in a fair way, that both of the sides share their pros and contras and want to understand and listen to the others, it can bring about fruits. This dialogue can bring about fruits to the future of European Union. But what we see now, that those voices who would like to keep the motto of the European Union, who want to act in the essence of the European Union's motto, unity in diversity, are depicted as anti-democratic, anti-European, and we know the labels. So the dialogue itself, it's sound, but for sure now those voices need to be strengthened, who stand up for the traditions of the member states, for the voices of the member states. And again, we arrive to a situation who stand up for the treaties and the European Union.
Thank you very much for sharing your insights with us and our viewers. I could not agree more with your statement at the beginning of your response, that the communication is in fact the key and the crucial asset among the Visegrad Group countries. And we'll stay with you for the second question. In the meantime, I highly encourage our viewers to ask questions in the chat. And moving further, but staying in the topic of EU, I want to ask you about the enlargement procedure, especially Visegrad Group's role in the possible enlargement of Western Balkans and Ukraine. Charles Michel mentioned that by 2030 we should have the first new member from the Balkans. But this will happen in a few years, so I personally don't think we will manage to enlarge EU that quickly. But what's your view on it, and what's the role of our countries in the process of enlargement?
Well, Hungary is an advocate of the enlargement in both directions. So the Balkan enlargement has been a priority for years, and will be also the Balkan itself will be a priority of the Hungarian presidency of the EU Council. I already referred to this unfair disinformation campaign that attacks and falsely presents Hungarian position in the, let's say, mainstream media. So they don't often mention it, but regarding Ukraine's accession, Hungary has been also one of the first to support the initiative after the letter of Poland and some other member state. The position is clear that it should, the criteria should be met. And obviously, even if there is some kind of reward to the heroism of the Ukrainian nation and people, this reward, it wouldn't bring about, let's say, good feelings if this reward would also mean being unfair towards those member states who had been waiting for the accession and had been step by step meeting the criteria. Not to let alone that obviously calculations and sound planning has to advance the accession, but generally the bigger, the more diverse we are, the stronger we are, because unity in diversity. Obviously, those voices that say that if we will be bigger and more members will be taken, then we should reconsider the question, for example, of the unanimous decision making, brings us back to the earlier discussed question.
Thank you very much. The situation on the east in Ukraine definitely reopened the discussion on EU enlargement that was a little bit out of the view for the recent years. But now let's move to Peter Sitash with the same question of the V4 role in EU enlargement. The floor is yours.
Well, I totally agree what Mihai have just said. So the question is, theoretically, we can influence this decision making. On the other hand, practically, we are not so successful at it because Hungary, but other also V4 countries have been lobbying for the Western Balkans for years. And we just see, because it's happening right at the moment, how the European Union is losing Serbia. And also there is Turkey, which is a key state. 4 million migrants are there on a daily basis. We depend on them, and we have been, Brussels and the European Union have been with them, not so kind word, but playing with them for decades now. And Viktor Orban had a really interesting speech recently, and he said that there are two suns on the sky, referring to Washington, D.C. and Beijing. But I'm pretty sure that Brussels want to join them soon. And if we want to become a real big player in the world map, then we definitely need to enlarge. And the Western Balkans, until they want to come, I think we should grab the opportunity and let them join, because the time will come, and these times are not far away. Then China will give them a much better offer than we are able to. And if we go back to Ukraine, Ukraine is a really special question because joining Ukraine at this very moment, in my opinion, it's impossible. So that would mean the end of the European Union, and not just because that we are talking about a country which is in war and which, in which case the physical borders, so the de facto and the de jure borders do not match. And we won't know, we don't see what the end of this conflict is going to be. On the other hand, we are talking about the second largest country in Europe. So the European Union, who is playing with Bosnia-Herzegovina, with Serbia, and trying to find problems in their law system, why to postpone their accession. And in case of Ukraine, I think it's simply impossible to allow Kyiv into the Union now. In a long term, there's a chance to it, but in the short term, not. And imagine that there are countries who are net payers of the European Union, they are benevolent of it. If Ukraine joined, that all the money, all the structural funds, all these sources should have been going to Ukraine. I'm sure that neither the V4 nor the European Union, not even the Western countries, are prepared to that. So on verbal level, on the level of communication, it's really nice because it also suggests that we stand behind Kyiv and we feel and want to express the empathy towards them. On the other hand, to turn the whole union upside down because of it, I don't think it's far from political realities.
Thank you very much. Thank you for touching the topic of the fact that to be stronger, to be more resilient, we need to enlarge, we need to grow. And that was especially interesting that we need to cover the current gray area of Balkans, because if we do not cover this area, then we have, for example, Chinese influence, right, coming from the Far East. We need to consider that as well. But gentlemen, we spoke about EU enlargement with Ukraine and Balkans, so let's stay with Ukrainian topic. And here I want to refer to the Visegrad countries' support towards Ukraine during the war. This is one of few aspects that we are pretty divided on, especially when it comes to aid to Ukraine. Two of countries are for more of military aid, and two countries are more for economic aid. What does that tell us about the Visegrad cooperation? Should we consider that alarming, or this is just a division in group of countries that happens in many other organizations? We'll stay with Peter Sitash.
Well, just as in every issue, I think there is one side in the whole Ukraine topic in which an agreement on V4 level, and there is another part on which there is no agreement. So in what there is agreement, at first we have to, because this can be a mutual ground for dealing with the issue. We have agreement that Ukraine is a victim of a violence. We agree on it that what Russia does, it's a clear violation of the international law. And we also agree on that the Ukrainian people need help. So I think these are, no one questions those what I have just said. On the other hand, the disagreement is on the point how we should help Ukraine. And there is a duality in the answers, because there are some countries, Warsaw or Czech Republic, who claim that military help should be given. And there are other countries, Slovakia, Hungary, which says that humanitarian aid should be given. In my opinion, it's really important to understand that this war has already been escalating, and we don't know where it ends and if it can be ended anyhow. So in the beginning, it was, even from Russian side, it was called a special military operation. Now we are talking about the biggest military conflict, a traditional military conflict since World War II. And it also seems that there are proxies in the war, because some analysts say that even Ukraine is a proxy of someone in the war. I'm not saying I agree with that, but this war is going on in Ukraine. So on the other hand, I think we can shortly get to a point when Russia will also be a proxy of someone in this war. As I have just said before, there are two suns on the sky. So we really have to be careful in it, because it's always easier to start a war and to escalate a war than to stop it. Hungary has made the biggest operation, the biggest humanitarian operation in its lifetime. We are talking about an 1100-year-old country. That was the biggest humanitarian operation what Hungarians did towards Ukraine. And we also supported the country not just with food and electricity, but also, for example, with fuel. So these are sometimes not said as loudly as should have been. On the other hand, what we are saying, that Ukraine is running towards a catastrophe, because hundreds of people are dying, not just from Ukrainian, Russian, on both sides, hundreds of people dying on a daily basis, and we don't know. If it goes on, and if it continues for a long term, we can reach a point where complete generations are going to be victims, and not just mentally victims, physically victims, or easily said, they are going to die, they are going to disappear. And what future a country can have, and I'm talking about Ukraine right now, and that's why I'm talking about Ukraine, because it is a much, in the field of population, but in the field of territory, it's a smaller country than Russia. What future will Ukraine have if the most productive generations are dying on that battlefield? So that's why what Hungary keeps saying, that There is no military solution to this problem, but there should be a political solution. And the political solution should be to both sides to the table, to the negotiating table, to stop the killing and make a deal. We know that international law are already trespassed and is not taken into consideration. But let's be honest, this is not the first time, and I'm afraid not the last time when things are not dealt by the international law. But what we have to take into, what we have to put in our focus, then young people are dying on a daily basis, and I think we should stop that, and we should stop that immediately.
Thank you very much for the detailed and interesting response, giving us also an overview on the perspective of Hungarian policymakers towards that issue. And now we'll move with the same question to Mr. Kovac about the divisions due to aid to Ukraine between our countries, please.
Thank you very much. If you allow me, I also would like to underline that there are much more points that connects us. And it's important because our region is the most exposed region to the consequences of the Russian aggression on Ukraine. So it's important that we keep talking because it's our countries who are in the biggest danger. And it's also our common interest, often not quoted, because it's not fits the lying propaganda of some media about the Hungarian position that already in 2022 Prime Minister Viktor Orban stated that our interests are the same, even with at that time seemingly more different positions of Poland and Hungary and the whole region, and that is to keep the Russian security threat on our region as low as possible. And for this, we need a free, sovereign Ukraine. And also, a Hungarian politician stated that obviously, because of the breach of the international law, Hungary also stands for the territorial integrity of Ukraine. So, but the Hungarian historical bitter experience, but I could quote also 1849, that at the end, this region can be led to the mercy of the invader, of the aggressor. This happened with Hungary in 1849 and in 1956. So this is our common memory, that at the end the heroism of the Ukraine soldier can turn out to be futile. So it's I'm not saying it cynically that the Hungarian position claims to be in the interests of the Ukrainian mothers, but also there is an understanding that other countries have other historical memories. So Hungary understands the emotions of the Baltic states and Poland. That's why it's important to speak and to try to understand and to work on it, as also Peter said, not only humanitarian aid, but also diplomatic aid. Nevertheless, I would also like to complete the listing of this immense help towards Ukraine, which obviously it's natural if some of our neighbors is in need. But for example, regarding the military, Hungary, as we know, does not anything that leads to escalation, but nevertheless, Hungary helps those in trouble, in need, in the framework. So, for example, in regard that we provide help in health assistance of wounded Ukrainian military servicemen, and the Hungarian Defense Force provides special paramedic training for Ukrainian military health experts, helping the life-saving capabilities. So really every kind of help that is not leading to escalation is granted. And not too long ago, President Volodymyr Zelensky had a tweet, and also Viktor Orban, about a phone call that the two countries are working on, also to enhancing and making progress in bilateral relations as well. So the position of the V4 countries are way closer to each other than those globalist media try to depict, who had always been trying to poison this relation.
Thank you very much. You are right indeed that the V4 is exposed to consequences of the conflict. Poland is on the border of NATO eastern flank, still struggling with migration crisis with Belarus. So we are still really exposed. We shouldn't forget about that. Gentlemen, let's move to topic less connected to conflicts or the harsh politics. I want to ask you about one great mutual project of the V4. I want to ask you about the Visegrad Fund, well, technically International Visegrad Fund, which is not very popular among the people, but it's really important because it supports scientific, educational, and many more projects. And in March this year, V4 foreign ministers decided on uplifting the budget for the fund of 10%. I want to ask you, just to give our viewers sort of view on the fund. How is this fund shaping our cooperation among the V4? Is this really a really good tool in our hands? And shall we pursue for increasing the budget in the future to enhance our cooperation? Peter Sitash, please.
So, in my humble opinion, the biggest problem of the V4 or the Visegrad Group is that it has not institutionalized yet. So we don't have such institutions. This is the only one, this EVF, Bratislava-based EVF, what we currently have. And if I'm right, the budget of it used to be around 10 million euros yearly. And now the decision in March, the decision was made to add an additional 10% to it. So I think that, of course, every money is a good money, especially if you are talking about institutions, and it really worth it, because if we have these institutions, these guarantee the cooperation, even in case the politicians do not want to cooperate. Because if we have these bodies worked out, it's the guarantee of cooperation, because it's easier to say that I will not take part in a meeting than to just simply close down such corporations and such institutions. On the other hand, I'm a little bit also skeptical in it, and maybe these are a little bit bitter words at the end of the conversation, but in my opinion, and if I want to be totally realistic, I think that the four parties want to show the world that, in spite of the fact they are having political misunderstandings, they truly believe in a common future, and that's why they made this move to a little bit correct the budget.
Thank you very much for that. We can also underline that many, especially young people, are using the fund, right? It has a great impact on academic cooperation. And now I will give the floor to Mr. Kovac on the same topic of the Visegrad Fund, please.
Finally, a little point where I don't completely agree with Peter. The first part I do, so maybe it was let's say, an overbalancing of the perception that now there are more points where the four countries are not agreeing, or there are disputes. But I think the will itself, that they wanted to overbalance this perception, is already a good sign. So that it means, it shows that they, even in such moment, we want to stand for this really makes a good service. That do you hear me? Sorry, because I'm frozen.
Yes, we just lost you for a
Yes, now
second. It's fine now.
Yes. Yeah. So mostly the fund, as you mentioned, supports academic but also cultural initiatives. And in such cases, when, for example, the hard politics has less common topics to stand for, these kinds of cultural cooperation become even more important, because what these cultural cooperations are for, that they show us that we have the same historical memory, we have the similar culture, and just the fact that musicians, artists, academic people come together, contribute to the dialogue between the four nations, and in a hierarchical perception, it also supports the high-level cooperation. So no money could be enough, and that's a good sign that the fund was raised. I completely agree that institutionalization is a key factor. I would also add that as a stable institution, this is the only one, but the presidency, the half yearly change, the presidency itself, that there is always a country responsible for the presidency, and in let's say more flourishing times, this actual presidency is responsible for the summits, is also a kind of institutionalization, or some kind of at least regularity. So I think that these practices have showed that the history of the V4 is way beyond the phase that some domestic changes in any other country could swipe it away. And again, especially in such tense geopolitical moments, it is more important than ever that we talk, and it turns out that there are way more subjects to cooperate than subjects that divide us.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. And with the topic of institutionalization, we've come to an end of our interesting debate on the future of the V4. I want to thank you once again for joining me today and sharing your interesting views and expertise with our viewers. And I also will use the chance to thank our viewers for being with us and encourage everyone to follow our next online events and analytical articles and reports. Gentlemen, I wish you a good end of the day and a good end of the day to our viewers as well. Thank you very much and see you next time.
Thank you.
Dziękujemy bardzo. Do widzenia.
Dziękujemy.
Do widzenia.